So Ruth, it's lovely to see you, and welcome virtually to Chapel A. You were here a few years ago and you were working for Arosha, but now you have a new role. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so, well, firstly, just say hello. It's really lovely to see you on a computer screen, and lovely kind of not quite to see all of you who are watching this, but I feel like I'm with you in some way. So I now work for Tear Fund, which probably quite a few of you will have heard of. It's a Christian relief and development charity that works in about 45 countries, really reaching into the poorest communities. And I head up what's called the Global Advocacy and Influencing Group. And I shan't bore you with the details around that.
That looks like something we might have to look up.
Yeah, yeah.
I was sort of interacting with you a bit on social media at the start of Lent because you were chosen by the Archbishop of Canterbury. I don't know quite how that happens, but you've had a book out this year, which was the Archbishop's Lent book. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. So I think the choosing is just one level down from when they choose the Pope. You know, it's that level of importance, kind of waiting for the smoke to come out. I think a group of very important people huddle in a room, and then they help the Archbishop decide who is going to write his Lent book for him. So there is a series called the Archbishop of Canterbury's Lent book, which sometimes the Archbishop writes, sometimes he commissions someone else to write. And he wanted it this year to focus on environmental and poverty issues, particularly from a global perspective, and with a really good, strong biblical underpinning. So I set to, I was chosen, which was a huge privilege and terrifying, and wrote a book called Saying Yes to Life. And the idea of it is that it goes through Genesis 1, through that first creation narrative, and each chapter looks at one of the days of creation and explores the thing that was created on that day, whether it's water or light or trees or humans, and looks at it from a biblical perspective, but then looks at what's the situation today and how can we be responding.
Wow. Well, that sounds... yeah, I haven't read it. I do know that there's a few folk in Chapel A who have.
Right.
So that sounds like a great sort of theological foundation. And we've been looking at theological foundations for engaging with particularly kind of what you might call creation care, or even kind of environmental justice. Last week we looked at the counter arguments. We looked at why some Christians think it's a red herring, or even are very strongly against the environmental movement. But this week we're out trying to ask the question: well, what do we do? And for a church to have an environmental impact, obviously we do. We buy things, we consume things. We want to move forward as a community in terms of how to be a positive force as a community. And I just thought this is something that you've been thinking about for many years. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how we as a community could do good to the environment.
Yeah, great. And actually Saying Yes to Life looks at that. It's got lots of practical things all the way through, and draws on the example of churches from all around the world. So there's lots of stuff in there as well that I hope would inspire people. When I think of how we respond as churches to the challenges that we've got, both poverty and environmental, and of course the two are completely inextricably linked, as we're seeing now in the pandemic, but that might be another discussion. I sometimes talk about standing in the gap. The way we respond as church is we stand in the gap. and we respond by giving, acting, and praying. So I wish that GAP didn't start with G, because I don't really think it's the best thing to start with the money thing. But you know, I do think how we use our money, it says where our values are, and what we really think. And for us as individuals and in our churches to be thinking and looking at, where do we put our money? Is it all going to internal things? And what are those internal things? And where we're giving to mission and ministry, does that mission and ministry also support organisations who are caring for the wider world as well? So thinking about our giving, and then I'm going to skip, I'm going to do a different order because I want to come focus on the acting. Then pray, I'd really put that in, and I wouldn't discount the importance of us as churches praying. I really believe in the power of prayer to make a difference. I think we saw that in the Paris climate talks 5 years ago, and we've seen that in other places as well. So find ways in your prayer life as a church. Please do be including also praying for the environmental problems that we're facing as well. Tear Fund, Christian Aid, CAFWAD, a whole range of organisations launched a year of prayer for the climate. That was when we thought we were leading up to COP at the end of the big climate change talks at the end of the year. We'll now keep that going into next year up until whenever those climate talks happen. So there's lots of good prayer resources out there on different organisations' websites. At Tear Fund, we've put together a whole climate prayer resource. So pray, please pray, because prayer does make a difference. And then acting, different things that we can do in our churches. One is getting engaged politically, and I think some of your members, I think you're kind of quite a politically engaged church, and quite a few of your members are already quite some way down this road, which is great. And there are things that you can do corporately as a church as well. So if there is an election coming up, which of course we know isn't going to be for a while, but or you might have local elections, I don't know. But when you've got particular moments coming up, why not get your MP in, or your local council representatives? You could have a meeting with the head of your council, ask her or him to come in and to talk to you about what's happening in your area, your local authority, you know, whatever the structure is around you, and get engaged in those climate change campaigns that are happening, that I imagine quite a few of your members are individually involved with, but you could do that together as church as well. So again, Tear Fund, but other organisations too, we're regularly running campaigns around climate, and as a church you can get involved at that core. And then I think there are things that you can do in your actual church life, and a lot of that is just about being aware of what you do, but doing it in a way that's more sustainable. So an obvious thing for me is thinking about refreshments, and particularly meals. If you have church meals together, maybe a lunch after a meeting, or you know, whatever it is you do, do you think at all about the kind of food that is being provided and where that comes from? I like to use the phrase default veg. So I would encourage you as individuals, but also when you're meeting together as a church and doing a meal, go default veg. Just have it that your default option is veg, but you can say to people, if they have a dietary requirement that means they require meat, to let the people organising it know. So meat is available if that is a genuine need, but the default option is veg, and it might even be vegan, depends, but I'm not pushing that. So thinking about your food is a great way collectively to be bringing these things into the sort of the front of our minds. And you're doing this already, so I don't really think I need to say this, but regularly including these kind of issues in your church life, in your sermons and your prayers, as I said, in your children's work and your youth work. I shall pause there.
Brilliant. No, that's fantastic. We have a monthly breakfast, and I have warned those who prepare the breakfast to get all the bacon sandwiches in before today.
Yeah.
It's probably the day that breakfast goes veggie.
Oh, do you know, I used to so love a good English breakfast. I'm not fully vegetarian. I will eat meat. I've kind of kept myself flexible for if I'm in a situation where meat is served, but I'm predominantly meat free and I don't cook meat at home. And I've just found naturally as I've done that, my tastes and what I crave have changed. So now if I'm presented with an option for breakfast, actually the full English breakfast doesn't look so attractive to me as it used to. It's really interesting. And that's come about not by forcing myself not to eat meat, but just by gradually reducing it down. And I think my insights have kind of changed and the psychology of it has changed along the way. So it's not a big issue for me anymore now.
Brilliant. Ruth, thank you ever so much for your time. And who knows, we may meet again in this world, if not the next. So bless you. Thank you ever so much. And
right, you're welcome. Lovely to be with you all.
I'm sure that will give us plenty to think about and plenty to do.
Fab. Thank you, Simon.
Okay, bye-bye.